Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are strapping in for what is probably the most horrifying yet strangely illuminating road trip into the world of creative compulsion, addiction, and just, well, utter psychological terror.
It's a big one.
It is. We are diving deep into Stephen King's 1987 novel, Misery, to understand how a writer survived his greatest fan.
And it's so much more than just a horror story, though the terror is absolute. This is a really profound examination of the relationship between an author and his audience.
Especially when that audience becomes a captor.
Exactly. We're tracking the ordeal of Paul Sheldon, a hugely successful novelist who crashes his car in the desolate, snow-choked Rockies near Sidewinder, Colorado.
And our mission really is to analyze his physical captivity, the psychological warfare waged by Annie Wilkes, and how the sheer desperate necessity of creative output became his shield, his therapy, and ultimately his only weapon.
Right. And Paul is such an interesting character to start with because of this internal conflict he has.
He's not just a novelist, He's a professional storyteller who completely understands the difference between art and commerce.
He says it himself. He writes two kinds of novels, good ones and bestsellers.
And when the story kicks off, he's just finished another successful Misery book, and he's carrying the only manuscript for the novel he genuinely believes is one of the good ones.
That manuscript is called Fast Cars, and it is everything to him. It's the embodiment of his literary ego, his desire to break free from the Victorian-era romance shackles of his famous heroine, Misery Chastain.
And the fate of that book, that specific non-Misery book, will immediately define the stakes of his new reality.
Absolutely. He wakes up needing to be nursed back to life, but his carer, Annie Wilkes, doesn't just want to save him. She wants to own his soul.
And more importantly, dictate his next story.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's unpack this journey into hell, because it all started with a choice. A really, really bad one.
Mm-hmm. Paul wasn't supposed to be driving at all.
Right. He'd been celebrating the completion of Misery's Child, and instead of just flying back to New York like a normal person, he impulsively decides to drive west.
And he gets drunk, not just a little tipsy. He secures a second bottle of Dom Perignon by tipping the bartender, George, $20 at the Boulder Auto Bar.
It's just such a classic King setup, isn't it? Self-inflicted chaos, paving the road to doom.
Totally. So he's driving high into the Rockies, roaring up I-70, and he detours off the main highway near the Eisenhower Tunnel. He chooses this dangerous back mountain road, specifically because the tunnel, that dark, confining space, made him nervous.
And the sky is described as the color of gunmetal.
Mm-hmm.
Just heavy menacing. You know something bad is coming.
Then the storm hits.
The car slides, the physics of his life just stop making sense, and he hears this heavy, dull thump before the world's up and down had swapped places.
He's broken, vulnerable, and completely alone in the middle of a blizzard.
And this is when she arrives. This is when Annie Wilkes arrives.
She's a massive figure, a big woman, and she finds him. She identifies him immediately, and this is such a critical detail because it establishes her obsession before she even starts nursing him.
What does she do?
She rifles through his wallet. She pulls out his driver's license, his Writers Guild card, and his PE card. She doesn't just know his name. She knows his professional identity.
Paul Sheldon, the writer, has been delivered to Annie Wilkes, the #1 fan.
Exactly.
His first conscious memory of the rescue is just so visceral, deeply, deeply unsettling, and it's laced with the first hints of Annie's monstrous duality.
He feels like he's being raped back into life.
Yes, she's giving him mouth-to-mouth, forcing her breath into him, and he describes this dreadful mixed stench on her breath.
That stench is a masterpiece of King's descriptive work. It really is. It's vanilla cookies and chocolate ice cream and chicken gravy and peanut butter fudge.
It's disgusting.
Well, look at that mix, though. It's the domestic, comforting, childlike sweetness of desserts, the nurse, the mother figure. But it's combined with the rank, heavy reality of sloppy, unhygienic dinner. The overwhelming keeper.
So he's trapped in a house in Sidewinder near the Great Divide, and this mixed aroma is the smell of his new prison.
And his physical state is just catastrophic.
Shattered. His legs are shattered, pulverized below the knees, and his left knee is swollen into what he describes as a salt dome.
And here's where the analysis of her terror truly begins. Annie, claiming her nursing expertise, sets the bones herself. She splints those pulverized legs with the hacksawed remains of aluminum crutches.
Oh, that's just the imagery of that.
It's significant because it's not just crude medical care, it's ownership. She has permanently damaged his mobility and rendered him utterly dependent.
She has literally taken parts of his former mobility,
Yes,
the crutches, and use them to create his permanent confinement.
Precisely.
And this trauma, this unbelievable physical trauma, leads Paul to his central realization about his new life, the piling method.
We have to spend time here.
We do, because it's one of the most powerful descriptions of chronic pain and psychological torture in modern literature.
Absolutely. The piling metaphor comes to Paul in a semi-lucid memory or dream of Revere Beach. He remembers a wooden piling, constantly battered by the tides.
Sometimes the water covers it, and the pain seems to be gone. But when the tide goes out, the barnacled, jagged structure is exposed, and the agony returns.
And the lesson he pulls from this, the core nugget, is that the pain only appears to come and go, but the piling itself is always there. The wound is permanent. The source of the agony is fixed.
And then comes the awful realization.
He realizes he has two pilings, his two shattered legs.
And who controls the tide?
Annie, of course. She administers the fictional codeine-based drug Novril in bitter capsules. This immediately establishes her as the master of his reality.
She controls the flow of relief. Without Novril, he is nothing but exposed pilings, and he becomes instantly addicted. His body just screams for the tide to come in.
And she puts this control to the ultimate test during a 51-hour period when she just leaves him alone, forcing this terrifying, uncontrolled withdrawal.
And he, in his delirium, he actually marks the hours on his arm with a Flair fineliner pen he somehow found.
It's a brutal catalog of suffering. I mean, he experiences the physical pain, the shaking, the sweats, the overwhelming thirst, which he mentally categorizes as this gruesome horse race.
A horse race between three metaphorical contenders. King of Pain, I got the hungries, and pretty thirsty.
Initially, King of Pain is dominant, right? But as the hours stretch on, 51 hours alone, that's nearly 2 full days.
Unbelievable.
The desperation for hydration and relief just overtakes everything, and this culminates in one of the most humiliating and degrading moments of the novel.
The attempt to drink his own urine.
He is so lost, so thirsty, that he tries to urinate into his cupped hands, using the sheet as a crude filter. He drinks it, and the profound shame is encapsulated in this single, desperate, internal vow. He would never tell anyone about that, assuming he ever got out of this.
And that single act just defines the depth of his degradation. He is not just suffering physical pain, he is suffering the acute, mind-destroying reality of drug withdrawal, what he calls junkie's revenge.
The psychological effect of this forced withdrawal is just huge. It completely shatters any remaining sense of dignity or control he had.
It tells him, in the clearest possible terms, that his survival is now entirely conditional on Annie's mercy and his compliance.
And he realizes the physical damage is possibly irreparable. He confirms that even if he escaped, he would be permanently crippled.
The physical reality and the addiction become this single terrifying feedback loop. Annie has found the perfect mechanism of control.
Yeah. By the end of this ordeal, Paul Sheldon, the successful, slightly arrogant celebrity novelist, has been reduced to an animal focused purely on the next bitter capsule.
So the intellectual battle for survival is about to begin, but the physical foundation has been utterly destroyed.
It's the ultimate setup for the Scheherazade role he's about to play.
He has to start writing, not because he wants to, but because he must create an addiction for Annie that is more powerful than his own addiction to the novel.
So once Annie returns and Paul is, somewhat stabilized with Novril, the entire environment shifts. He moves from being a damaged patient to becoming an employee, a highly controlled writer in residence.
And the shift from physical to psychological captivity is immediate. And it's triggered by Annie finishing his latest work, Misery's Child.
And her reaction is volcanic.
Oh, yeah. She is utterly enraged, shrieking, "Misery Chastain cannot be dead."
This isn't just a critique from a fan, right? It's a theological crisis for her.
That's a great way to put it.
She views Paul as God to his fictional universe, and by killing Misery, his most bankable character, he has committed a kind of sacrilege. She calls him a dirty bird for this fictional murder.
The discussion here is just fascinating because it delves right into the nature of fandom and narrative expectation.
Paul tries to use logic. He says, look, Misery died in childbirth in 1871, which was historically accurate for the era of the books.
And Annie doesn't care about realism.
Not one bit. She dismisses his defense instantly, asserting with the reader's flat, uncontradictable certainty that characters and stories do not just slip away.
So what's the deeper meaning here? Is she just rejecting realism, or is she rejecting the author's sovereignty? I really think it's the latter.
I think you're right. She sees Misery as a real person that she is protecting, and Paul's attempt to assert artistic control by killing her is an act of betrayal against her, the fan. She believes the characters belong to the reader as much as the creator.
And the irony is just, it's magnified when we look at Paul's internal monologue.
Oh, yeah. He, the author, harbors this tremendous contempt for his cash cow, Misery. He reveals he hated her since the third book.
And he confirms this by recalling that he privately printed this disgusting, crude booklet called Misery's Hobby for his Friends, detailing her having sex with a dog.
So his killing of Misery was an act of personal artistic liberation.
Which Annie has now successfully reframed as a capital crime against her emotional universe.
And that brings us to the ultimate symbolic sacrifice, the destruction of his beloved Fast Cars manuscript.
Annie, after reading it, judges the unique 190,000-word work to be filthy and no good.
It's too modern for her, too rough, too far removed from the 19th century romance she expects.
The destruction is agonizingly specific. Paul is forced to burn the unique manuscript page by page on a barbecue grill using diamond blue tip matches.
King forces you, the reader, to sit with the excruciating loss of artistic output. And this is where we have to pause and analyze the psychological crisis.
Because Paul had always irrationally refused to photocopy his work.
He thought it would jinx the book. He loved the pure uniqueness of the physical object.
And now, that superstition has ensured its total eradication. It's an eradication of his identity as a serious writer, the author of good books.
And Paul's internal reckoning during the burning is the ultimate thematic nugget of this section. He watches the words from Fast Cars vanish. "I don't have no wheels," Tony Bonasaro said.
And he acknowledges that the lives and narratives he poured into that manuscript were mere shadows.
While the novel pills, the promise of relief that Annie held out, were real.
The destruction of his best work was secondary to his physical need for the drug.
Creativity, for Paul, has instantly devolved from an art form to a survival mechanism. It's a price he is willing to pay for his next fix.
So once the artistic self is destroyed, the command performance is issued.
Right. Annie orders him to write Misery's Return. It must be the only copy just for me, as payment for her nursing him.
He is now compelled to resurrect the character he murdered for his own liberation.
And the tool for this rebirth is an old, clacking royal typewriter. This typewriter is almost a character in itself.
It is. Paul notices its flaws immediately. It has a gritting, gapped mouth where a key is missing.
And it has a distinctive Ducky Daddles voice when used. It is inefficient, ugly, and imperfect.
But it is the only physical means of producing the life-saving story.
And this is the Scheherazade dynamic we mentioned. Paul understands that his life relies entirely on his ability to spin a tale compelling enough and long enough to keep Annie captivated.
If the story flags, or if he disappoints her again, he dies. He is performing for his executioner, and the royal typewriter is his lifeline.
And the expectation isn't just to write, it's to write well and correctly, according to Annie's precise delusional rules.
You know, Paul understands that Scheherazade can't be totally subservient. She has to maintain some degree of dignity and control to feel human.
Right, which leads to his initial, very cautious attempts to test Annie's boundaries.
The first resistance is so minor, it's almost childish, but it's psychologically loaded. He demands cheaper paper.
Right. Annie had bought him this expensive, slick, coercible bond, the kind writers use for neat final drafts. He rejects it and demands a cheaper, rougher stock.
Paul recognizes the immediate danger in this small defiance. Annie's face just darkens instantly.
He sees her emotional climate described as springtime in the Midwest, sudden, violent tornadoes just waiting to drop.
He knows he must placate her like a tribe placating an angry, unstable goddess. But he also knows if he acts too frightened, she will storm all the more, enjoying his submission.
He's navigating a knife's edge, trying to use his creative role to justify his minor demands.
This testing culminates in his first serious act of defiance.
Yeah.
An escape attempt, or at least a reconnaissance mission, to find Novril and a phone.
He uses a bobby pin he found, and in a beautiful piece of dark irony, he knows how to pick the simple lock based on knowledge he gained while researching Fast Cars.
The very book he was forced to burn.
The good book provides the practical survival tip. He manages to pick the lock and rolls his wheelchair into the parlor.
And the key objective is confirmed. His suspicion that Annie suffers from deep neurotic paranoia is correct because he finds no telephone. She has eradicated it from the house.
And the reason for the phone being gone is critical to her paranoia, isn't it?
It is. Paul deduces it links back to her past, specifically the Roidmans who were involved in a Denver trial she'd been a part of. She believes the outside world, particularly law enforcement and the courts, are in league against her.
The outside world is a judgmental enemy, and she has sealed herself and Paul inside this protective bubble of denial and use.
But the reconnaissance mission nearly costs him everything.
He rolls back, he stuffs the stolen Novril under his mattress, but the broken bobby pin jams the lock mechanism.
He can't fully secure the door before she returns. He's exposed, caught in the act.
Annie's gaze drops immediately to the Novril boxes hidden in his lap, and she notices the scrape marks left by his wheelchair, forcing its way through the tight doorway.
The gig is up. And this disobedience confirms for Paul that he must understand her completely if he hopes to survive.
This necessity leads him to memory lane.
He finds Annie's enormous scrapbook, and the details he unearths are just terrifying, documenting a pattern of freak accidents that stretch back decades.
The earliest entry is from 1954, when Annie was just 11. The article describes the Centralia fire, which killed 5 people, including 3 children.
And Paul immediately connects this to Annie's previous offhand comment about hating Mrs. Kredmitz's 4 brats downstairs, leading him to the chilling conclusion that she likely set the fire deliberately, not just for arson, but for murder.
And then the pattern repeats in the sickening way, focusing on freak falls down the stairs.
In 1957, her 44-year-old father, Carl Wilkes, dies from multiple skull fractures after tripping over loose clothing.
Then, 5 years later in 1962, her 21-year-old USC nursing student roommate, Andrea St. James, dies from a similar fall, allegedly tripping over the dead cat, Peter Gunn.
What stands out here, what Paul instantly grasps, is the similarity of the freak falls.
These weren't accidents. They were intentional acts. And the victim's father, roommate, were people close to her under her perceived care.
This realization is the ultimate horror. Annie Wilkes, the self-proclaimed benevolent nurse, is a cold, calculating serial killer hiding in plain sight. She had found that the role of caregiver provided the perfect cover for murder.
And the implication is just crystal clear. Paul is not being held by an unstable enthusiast. He's being held by a true psychopath with a documented body count, a history of manipulating the legal system, and a deep-seated paranoia.
He's trapped with a killer who understands forensic detail just well enough to cover her tracks, but whose internal madness occasionally bubbles to the surface in bursts of rage and self-pity.
This knowledge, the understanding that Annie is a serial killer, means Paul can no longer write simply to placate.
No.
He must write flawlessly. He has to perform the greatest trick of his career, or he's going to die. This necessitates a profound shift in his creative process.
He moves from the luxurious, serendipitous state of getting an idea, where inspiration arrives like a gift, like seeing a parking lot attendant sparking the idea for fast cars,
to the punishing, arduous necessity of trying to have an idea.
He refers to this as forcing himself into the sweatshops down below. This is creation under economic and physical terror.
And that is a critical distinction for any creative person. Paul is no longer driven by muse or joy. He is driven by survival engineering. He connects this desperation to a childhood game called Can You?
Can You? Was a game where participants had to find a fair way out of an impossible scenario, like careless Corrigan surrounded by lions.
Right, and you had 10 seconds to devise a non-cheating solution. If the escape involved a trick not established in the scenario, like an Andean vulture suddenly appearing, the group would yell, "Did he?" and the person would be out of the circle.
This childhood game becomes Paul's guiding principle for writing Misery's Return. He knows Annie possesses a constant reader's flat and uncontradictable certainty.
She may be insane, but she understands story logic. She accepted the deus ex machina in old movie serials like finding a parachute under his seat as fair, even if it was unrealistic.
But she hated plot cheats, like showing Rocket Man escaping the sealed car before it went over the cliff when the previous week explicitly showed him trapped until impact.
So this means Paul must avoid any easy fix. He can't just say Misery had a twin sister. That would be a cheat. He needs an H-bomb idea.
A massive, shocking plot twist that is nevertheless fair within the bounds of the narrative world he and Annie inhabit.
And he finds it. He finds it, inspired by the gruesome, frantic scratch marks that Coulter, the sexton in the story, hears. The H-bomb idea. Misery did not die. She succumbed to a rare, death-like cataleptic trance.
Like an Indian fakir, a state where they voluntarily induce burial-like conditions, she was, in fact, buried alive.
And it's the perfect solution. It respects the narrative of the previous novel. She appeared dead, while satisfying Annie's demand that Misery Chastain cannot be dead.
It's gruesome, it's dramatic, and most importantly, it sets up a clear problem for the rest of the story. How do they dig her out without cheating the reader? He successfully manufactured a life-saving plot twist in the sweatshops.
But as Paul is pouring his entire existence into the page, Annie's mental state is rapidly deteriorating.
She enters what Paul labels the Burkaby goddess phase, a descent into severe depressive psychosis. This is the manic-depressive personality sliding past instability into pure madness, marked by acts of self-punishment.
Her physical presentation just reflects this collapse. She starts appearing with red wheals on her skin, food splatters across her clothes, and mismatched shoes.
Which produces a terrible, distinctive thud slush sound as she walks.
He witnesses her slapping herself and pinching her lower lip until it bleeds. She is self-destructing right in front of him, and he knows that if she completely loses control, he is finished.
The complete, terrifying unmasking of her psychosis happens during one of these low periods when she brings him a rat caught in a Victor rat trap.
She expresses this intense maternal sympathy for the poor thing, treating it with sudden, confusing tenderness.
But then, in a second, the tenderness just vanishes. With brutal efficiency, she crushes the rat's body in her fist, listening to its bones break.
The visceral horror reaches its peak in the next moment. She then sucks the rat's blood from her fingers.
It's unbelievable.
This act confirms that she has completely abandoned human social constraints and is operating on a purely primal, psychotic level.
That moment is so important for Paul. It's not just gruesome. It's a confirmation that she is utterly capable of cold, clinical violence mixed with grotesque intimacy. She is completely unmasked.
And she means it when she suggests they should just die together. Shortly after this, she leaves for her highly isolated, laughing place upcountry, a place where she admits, mostly I just scream.
While Annie is gone, Paul finds his only solace and escape not in physical movement, but in the writing itself. He notes that his craft is the one thing no drug, no pain, and no trauma has ever polluted.
He flees to it like a thirsty animal finding a water hole. The process, despite being forced, is still pure for him.
But the act of creation is taking a physical toll. When the old Royals' frequently used E-key finally breaks, Paul is forced to switch to writing in longhand.
Which causes his swollen right hand to develop a large, hard growth, half callus and half blister, on his index finger. This is the literal physical cost of the craft.
His body is being sacrificed to the story, and the damage of the typewriter has transferred itself directly onto his flesh.
He is using his last remaining physical function, his ability to grip a pen and string together words, to survive. The man who scorned the misery books is now using every ounce of his professional skill to create the bestseller that he hates, simply to keep breathing.
The slow, agonizing psychological game then accelerates into this terrifying physical confrontation with the arrival of the state trooper.
Officer Gonyar, he's investigating a found car bumper, and he shows up at Annie's remote chain driveway.
Annie's reaction is immediate and practiced. She handcuffs Paul to the bed, stuffs his mouth with a dusty rag that tastes of pledge or indust, and delivers the ultimate threat.
If he makes a sound, she will kill the officer, then kill him, and then kill herself. The stakes have never been higher.
Paul, immobile and terrified, just hears the muffled exchange. He later pieces together the appalling truth. Annie murdered the trooper.
She used the riding lawnmower blade in the barn, and crucially, Paul realizes she was meticulous. She hosed the body and the mower off, but she missed a critical detail.
She neglected to clean the blood-slimed blade housing underneath the mower.
And this slip confirms her humanity in a sense. It gives Paul a shred of hope. Even the monster is imperfect.
The terror only escalates from there. Annie returns, paranoid and desperate, and administers two of the most barbaric punishments in the book, justifying them as necessary steps.
She first amputates Paul's left foot with an axe. One quick, clean blow. And then later, she amputates his thumb with an electric knife.
The juxtaposition of the tools is just chilling. The primal axe followed by the mundane domestic electric knife.
Paul understands her warped rationale. These are acts of punishment, but also, in her delusional mind, acts of necessary surgery. She's ensuring he can never run and making his writing process more difficult, asserting complete ownership over his remaining body parts.
This is where her role as nurse completely dissolves into executioner.
Despite the unimaginable pain Paul soldiers through, he reaches the end of the required novel, Misery's Return, signing off with the crucial handwritten words, "The End."
This completion marks the boundary. The story's finished, and his only value to Annie has expired.
And now comes the moment of Paul's ultimate calculated revenge. He had been hoarding lighter fluid, which he smuggled from the cellar during an earlier unmentioned excursion, hiding it under his mattress.
He douses the entire manuscript of Misery's Return on the final night.
He knows his enemy perfectly. When Annie enters and discovers the fire, her reaction is exactly what he anticipated. She doesn't reach for Paul, who is lying on the bed. She doesn't reach for a weapon.
She stumbles forward, arms outstretched, wailing, "You can't burn Misery, you cockadoodie brat! You can't burn Misery!" The creation is more precious than the creator. The story is her life force, and this provides Paul with his opening.
He seizes his weapon, the hot royal typewriter, ignoring the new blisters it creates on his raw hands. He hurls it, striking Annie squarely in the back.
The ensuing struggle is one of the most violent, frantic finales King ever wrote. Paul, horribly maimed and operating on pure adrenaline, chokes her with a paper, falls on her, and smashes her with the pig statue. The violence is chaotic and messy, ending with Annie sustaining deep burns. But crucially, she has a large shard of green glass poking out of her right cheeks like a tomahawk blade.
But even with a severe head injury and burns, Paul's earlier suspicion proves prophetic. The goddess never dies.
Annie manages to crawl toward him, screaming these distorted sounds, "Dird! Ooh, dird!" through her throat full of paper.
As Paul pulls away, he leaves the leather circlet he had around his stump in her hand.
And that leather circlet is such a potent symbol. It's the last remnant of his physical confinement, and he has successfully shed it, leaving Andy clutching the token of his captivity instead of the man himself.
The true end comes when Paul is rescued. Two police officers, following up on the chain driveway and Gagnard's disappearance, arrive.
Paul, gathering the last of his strength, finds the ceramic penguin figurine in the parlor, marked with the inscription, "Now my tale is told," and throws it through the window, finally summoning help.
He's rescued, but the trauma is permanent.
He walks with T-shaped sticks, hating the persistent metallic clack, 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 clack sound they make. He is forever convinced that Annie cannot be dead.
The goddess never dies. Even though she is found deceased, implied near the barn area, having crawled toward the mower shed.
And in the aftermath, the creative output is confirmed as a massive success. Misery's Return is an unprecedented bestseller.
His editor, Charlie Merrill, believes a nonfiction account of the ordeal, Paul's memoir of the captivity, would outsell it. He thinks it would outsell even Iacocca.
And for those unfamiliar, the Lee Iacocca memoir in 1984 was the defining blockbuster must-read nonfiction book of the decade. So for Merrill to suggest Paul's trauma could eclipse that level of cultural saturation is saying something about the value of celebrity trauma.
Yet Paul refuses to write it. He knows he can't write that book, probably not ever, and this is the final deep insight into the writer's mind.
Paul admits that if he were to write the true account, he would be pathologically compelled to fictionalize it, to create that roundness. He fears the act would be auto-cannibalism.
He can't face the facts. He has to apply narrative structure to survive, even post-captivity.
But the creative engine, however damaged, still sparks. He finds a small, unassuming idea for a new novel. A skunk in a shopping cart in New York.
He acknowledges the idea is a bit of a dullard trick and perhaps done ineptly compared to his past work, but he notes he does it with love.
The compulsion to create has survived the monster, though it is permanently redefined.
If we look back at Paul Sheldon's deep dive, his life became this brutal demonstration of the creative process under extreme duress. His story became his drug, his focus, and ultimately his weapon against a terrifying monster.
He had to become a brave, calculating character, the modern Scheherazade, to survive.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The trauma fundamentally redefined his relationship with truth in fiction. He used his professional instincts to survive, but in doing so, he destroyed his ability to engage with pure fact.
The writer's final admission is that he cannot tell the true story of his life because he is pathologically compelled to create structure, to create that necessary roundness and fictional closure, even when dealing with the absolute facts of his own near-death experience.
The line between self-preservation and artistic truth just blurred irreversibly. Paul may have escaped Annie's physical captivity, but he remains trapped inside his own narrative frame, unable to view his life without imposing the order of fiction onto it.
Paul used his creativity to survive a monster. We all create narratives to cope with pain, fear, and chaos. So this raises an important question for you, the listener. If you were forced to write the true nonfiction story of your greatest trauma, Would you be able to write the facts, or would you find yourself automatically fictionalizing the ending just to create that necessary roundness?